Welcome to Regent University's main theater. In the interest of safety, please take a few moments to locate the emergency exit that is closest to you. In the unlikely event of an announced emergency evacuation, please leave the theater by that exit and follow the emergency exit signs overhead until you are completely outside the building. At this time, please ensure that all cell phones and pagers are turned off or set to silent mode. Flash photography and audio or video recording of this event is prohibited. Please remember that food and beverages are never permitted inside the theater, and smoking is prohibited inside all Regent University buildings.
I think the currency of leadership is sacrifice. People who care enough about the nobility of their objectives to give all that they have in order to see those objectives come true.
My goal with Regent is to see it not rival Harvard and Yale, but to rival Oxford and the Sorbonne in the Middle Ages as a school that can impact the whole society.
If we really want to change the world, we have to understand what the world really is so that we can effectively reach those people.
In the time that I've been at Regent, I could just feel the Lord calling me to serve Him and to serve His people.
You can tell the professors, the administrators, everyone that they're willing to pour into your life.
There's so much opportunity for you to become a success that will make history tomorrow.
It wasn't just me, it wasn't just my story. That God was doing the same thing throughout the world.
If we are a dedicated and committed people, making the world a better place to be is what it's all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, Regent University welcomes you to a presidential candidate forum with Governor Jeb Bush. Now, to open our program, Regent University Vice President, Mrs. Anne LeBlanc.
So excited to host a full house here today at our Communication and Performing Arts Center. We are also pleased to welcome guests joining us from our simulcast location at the Regent University Chapel, and those joining us online for the live stream event. During the forum today, you will have the opportunity to participate in a live audience poll using your cell phone. Selected poll results will be shared at the end of our event, so please be sure to submit your entries before the poll closes at 3:25. To start the poll, simply text Regent Forums. Regent Forums, all one word, no spaces, and at extension 37607. That number again, 37607. Follow the instructions that are in your program. For those participating online, instructions can be found at regent.edu/poll. regent.edu/poll. All right, if you haven't already turned your question card in, those of you in the audience here, just hold that up right now. Our student alumni ambassadors will come down and pick those up. Does anybody have a question you haven't turned in? You can also submit questions for Governor Bush using hashtag Regent Forums. All right, so those of you joining us online, hashtag Regent Forums. We would like to recognize some of our special guests here with us today. First thing is to thank the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN News, for producing and live streaming today's forum. We also have numerous public officials joining us today, more than I could begin to call out by name, but a few that we'd like to acknowledge are former Governor Bob McDonnell, please stand. Delegate Barry Knight. Barry? He hasn't gotten here yet. Delegate Glenn Davis. Delegate Scott Taylor. Mayor Alan Krasnoff. I haven't seen Alan, but he was here. And wife of Congressman Randy Forbes, Mrs. Shirley Forbes. Are you here with us? I saw you earlier. All right. And there are many other elected officials, and we just thank you for joining us today. We also want to thank Regent University's Board of Trustees. We thank you for being with us and giving us your guidance, and our Vision Weekend guests that have joined us. And our presenting sponsor, the American Center for Law and Justice, the ACLJ. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Regent University Singers. They're going to be performing an a cappella rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. When we reach the national anthem portion of the song, we do ask that you would stand. Thank you.
On the shore dimly seen through the mist of the deep, where the foe's hearty host in dread silence reposes. What is that in the breeze on the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in glory reflects, and now shines on the stream. 'Tis the Star-Spangled Banner, oh, long may it wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
And thus be it e'er, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven rescue land. Praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our creed: in God is our trust, and the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose sparks shines and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Weren't they terrific? We are just so proud. They're 1 year old right now, so they're a very young little group we have at Regent. Now to introduce our moderator, Dr. J. Allen Sekulow, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. ACLJ is a law firm and educational organization that focuses on constitutional law. Jay is also the Chief Counsel of the European Center for Law and Justice, a nationally recognized and respected defender of constitutional freedoms. He has assembled one of the most prestigious law firms in the nation. In 2005, Time magazine called the ACLJ a powerful counterweight to the ACLU. Jay received his PhD from Regent University and is an honors graduate of Mercer Law School and Mercer University. He is the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling book, Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore, and has served on Regent's Board of Trustees for over 12 years. Jay has earned many more accolades that I could highlight today, but one interesting fact I always like to share is that he has argued a remarkable 12 cases before the Supreme Court. He is a great friend of Regent University, and it is an honor to have him here with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. J. Sekulow.
Thanks, Ann. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to our Executive Leadership Series, our Presidential Forum. We are really excited about getting this underway. This is a big moment for the university as we continue bringing incredible speakers with unbelievable talent. I mean, we got, this is what Dr. Pat Robertson and the Robertson family set out as the vision for Regent: excellence. And you're going to see that tonight. So let me give you a little bit about the kind of the framework of how we're going to do this. So I'm going to give a very brief introductory comments. It'll be followed by a video. Governor Bush is going to talk to the group. There'll be a video, and then Dr. Robertson and the governor will have a conversation. And then while they're having a conversation, we're going to get questions, and I'm going to get to ask those questions. I always like asking the questions. Someone asked me, I like being on the moot court side when you're the judge. It's a lot less stressful than the advocate. Although I will tell you very quickly, we had a major case in San Francisco this past week and involving those Planned Parenthood videos. And of all the lawyers in the room, I was the old guy, which was a good thing. So, it's a very interesting time for leadership in the United States. You look at the situation we're dealing with. The president was asked in an interview about Vladimir Putin. The president said, I don't think that's leadership, talking about the Russians' engagement into Syria. He said, if you think that running your economy into the ground and having to send troops in order to prop up your only ally is leadership, then you have a different definition of leadership. My definition of leadership would be leading on climate change. So right now we have an Iran posed to go nuclear, exporting its ideology throughout the Middle East now. We have a muscular Russia flexing its weight in the region, something we haven't seen since the Soviet era. An Islamic political machine in Turkey. The rise of ISIS. As famed British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, the gates of new peril were now opened on the world. But I also think this is an incredible time of hope. And I know Governor Bush is going to be talking about this. We live in perhaps the greatest time on earth. Not only with the technology, but just of what can be accomplished if we have that right leadership in place. I've been doing a study of Winston Churchill over the last year, and he made an interesting statement in his book called The Aftermath, and it was the last book he wrote in a series of 4 books about World War I. It was after World War I was over, and he said this: "It is the business of statesmen to let themselves not be moved just by feelings, however deep and natural those feelings might be, but rather to steer away from those dangerous currents and to persevere steadily towards the harbor which they have set out to gain. Steady, consistent leadership in the face of peril, in the face of opportunity." Our guest this afternoon, Governor Jeb Bush, is such a statesman and a leader. He and his wife, Columba, live in Miami, Florida. They have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. And I will tell you, now that I've got grandchildren, I used to say that the greatest thing in the world, one of the greatest things, where they call your name before the Supreme Court of the United States and say, "Mr. Sekulow will now hear from you." And I'm a grandson of a Russian immigrant. Mr. Sekulow will now my favorite thing to be called is Pawpaw. And I've got 2 granddaughters, twins on the way. Jeb and Columba have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. He was the 43rd governor of the state of Florida. I believe, and I think anybody that objectively reviews the facts would acknowledge that he was the most, or certainly at his time point, when he was in the early part of his, right when he became the governor, right till the end, led tremendous change with conservative principles. 8 years were marked by record tax cuts, reduction in government spending, strong job growth, major government reform, including an overhaul of Florida's failing educational system. He is a governor committed to education. He would be a president committed to education reform. Following his time as governor, Jeb, of course, returned to the private sector, but continued to work on education reform, something that I know for the people here in this auditorium and those that are watching right now is a major issue. I will tell you this, since launching his campaign, the governor set out a clear vision. And vision in leadership is critical. And I think right now, vision, optimism, hope are what makes America great. And we need leaders that embody that. It is an honor to introduce our guest, the former governor of Florida, the Republican presidential candidate, Governor Jeb Bush.
Thank you. There we go.
There you are, coming from the other side. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you so much. It is great to be here at Regent University, to Dr. Robertson and all of the Regent family. It is a joy to be here. This looks a little too tall for me. I think I might come down here I hope that doesn't mess up the TV, but I'm delighted to be here. I first wanted to talk a little bit about my faith journey, because I think now there's a debate about whether people of faith should actually act on their faith in the public square. Really? How do you put aside your faith on the important issues that truly matter? The questions of life, the questions of compassion, the things that motivate people to act on their heart to try to help people. I, for one, believe that people of faith should act on their faith, and they should be informed by their faith. My life journey started, thankfully, when I woke up in Midland, Texas, and I opened up my eyes, and there she was, Barbara Bush, talking about a blessing from God. I went to Sunday school at St. Martin's Episcopal Church when we moved to Houston, and my faith journey got a little more serious when I got married And I was kind of overwhelmed with work. It wasn't like there was any traumatic experience going on in my life, but I was living the tyranny of the present. Maybe people understand this. People driven to success. I was kind of overwhelmed. And at one point I just said, I got to pause. I got to get quiet. And I started reading the Bible. And I think it was like Romans. Got about to there, and I realized that Jesus was my Savior. And I accepted Him in the late 1980s, and it has given me a comfort that I cannot describe to you really well, but I can promise you this, that it has given me a comfort and a serenity that has made my life journey a lot easier and a lot simpler. In 1995, after losing an election, I joined the church of my precious wife. Columba and I have been married now for over 40 years. It was love at first sight, and we were going to Catholic church because I wanted my children to grow up in the church of their mama. And I converted to the Catholic faith on Easter Sabbath in 1995, and that too has been something that has really informed my thinking and my beliefs. Here are the three things that I think are important as it relates to my faith and as it relates to the intersection of faith and being on the public square. One is that life is a gift from God, and that it is precious and it should be protected from beginning to end. Secondly, I believe in the power of subsidiarity, which is a Catholic approach that kind of converges with my political thoughts as well, which is that we should shift power every chance we can get away from distant government towards the people, to communities, to families. That every chance we have, we should default to shifting power back to communities, because our greatness as a nation doesn't revolve around Washington, D.C. I can promise you that. The greatness of this country revolves around strong, loving families surrounded by robust, loving communities where people solve their problems amongst themselves, and the interaction of people in pursuit of their own dreams creates more prosperity, more benefits than any government program ever created and ever devised. And the third concept I'd like to talk about here today relates to the belief that religious freedom and religious liberty is being challenged today, not just overseas, but that's certainly a challenge, but here at home as well. And people of faith need to stand on principle to protect the first freedom of the greatest country on the face of the earth. As it relates to life, life is precious, and it is something that should be protected. And as governor of the state of Florida, I got to do just that. I did it with my arms wide open. I didn't do it in any kind of secret plan. I didn't do it judging people. I did it because it is important. I did it because it is directly related to what I believe is a just society. And so when I was governor of the state of Florida, the first place that created a Choose Life license plate was Florida, and we increased dramatically the number of adoptions because of that. We had a huge problem with our foster care system. The abandonment, neglect, and abuse of children in this country is outrageous. It is tragic. It is sad. And we reformed our child welfare system, and one of the things we made sure that happened was that moms and dads that wanted to be moms and dads, people could get children out of foster care and be able to love these children with their heart and soul. And we had triple-digit increases in the number of people leaving foster care. And we eliminated the atrocious procedure of partial birth abortion in my state. I defunded Planned Parenthood. We increased funding for all sorts of causes. In fact, the state of Florida, I think, was the first state to have state monies going to crisis pregnancy centers. We did this in a way that wasn't judgmental or conflictive, and in fact, I'm proud of what we did because it became the norm. And to this day, Florida continues to be a pro-life state. But protecting life doesn't just end with the unborn. In my state, we also focused on people that truly needed the help of people. I'll never forget meeting Berthe Aponte, a frustrated mom whose biggest fear, and she told me this in a crowd in front of 300 people, her biggest fear was whether she would outlive her child who had severe developmental disabilities. Wow. Think of that. Think of the struggle that goes on when you love your child. It's a gift from God, and you wonder whether there will be help after you pass. Well, in Florida, we had a horrific situation with our programs for the developmentally disabled. A federal judge was about ready to take over the program. And I listened to people like Berthy. I went to the group homes and the institutionalized settings and the workplaces where people were treated with dignity and respect. And I said, that should be the norm in Florida. Because life is precious. Everybody is an asset. Everybody has a chance to be able to make a contribution in a just and loving society. If you believe that, then you should act on that belief, not just believe it in your church pews or believe it in your home. You need to act aggressively on it, and that's exactly what we did. And during my time, 30,000 families got care, that got taken off a waiting list and got care in a reformed system. A conservative did this with a conservative legislature. And I believe that Florida is a better place because the people that got in the front of the line during my tenure were the most vulnerable. The sick, the infirmed, elder shut-ins, the unborn, and people in our child welfare system. I hope you want someone as President of the United States that actually believes that they should be in the front of the line in Washington, D.C. Because we have people now in the front of the line that have already made it. The lobbyists, the people that want to get a special tax deal. They want to get a little more money for their program. They want to create a sanctuary around their business or their way of life rather than creating an open, dynamic society. We need to challenge and disrupt the order in Washington, D.C. if we're serious about protecting people that are deserving of receiving government support. Most people just want government to get out of the way, and they're right. But there are people that truly need the help of government, and we need to be effective on how we're doing it, and that comes from my faith, and I hope it does yours as well. This concept of subsidiarity, it's it's a 4-syllable word. You're not supposed to talk that way in politics these days. I apologize. Normally it's all in 140 characters, right? If you can't tweet it, it's not worth showing. This is a profoundly important point because it's at the core of the existence of our republic. Every time we outsource responsibility over taking care of a neighbor, we allow government to get bigger. And today, government is huge. And the regulations on top of government, when you can't spend your way to prosperity, which is never going to happen, then you try to regulate your way to prosperity or tax your way to prosperity. That's what the progressive liberal agenda is all about. It's taking power away from families and communities and shifting it as far removed as possible because they think they're smarter than the rest of us. They think interacting amongst ourselves, we're not capable of solving these problems. Well, let me give you a good example of how this works. In the Obama world, smart people from the Department of Energy thought that they could be the venture capital arm for the next generation of energy. Solyndra is a great example of that, and many others. Almost every one of these failed. The other approach is the approach where you apply private property rights, part of our Constitution, where a Greek immigrant, through trial and error in a private business, applied two existing American technologies and innovated in a way that created a revolution where we now have over 100 years of supply of natural gas. The best deal that Americans have gotten in the last decade of time is low gasoline prices and low utility prices, and it didn't come from government. It came from freedom. It came from people taking risks and applying their best efforts through trial and error and creating prosperity for all of us. Subsidiarity means that. It means shifting power back to people and trusting the interaction amongst ourselves will create far more prosperity, far more benefits, far more discoveries, far more progress than any government program. And as governor of the state of Florida, I got to do that as well. I cut taxes every year, totaling $19 billion. Everything that was a problem in terms of allowing people to rise up, I challenged it. We took on the trial lawyers, and we won. We took on the teachers' union, and we beat them. We took on the bureaucracy. In Florida, you can fire somebody today for incompetence. I know that sounds like a radical idea that lifetime employment isn't the norm. We reduced the state government workforce by 11%. I've got tire marks on my forehead for disrupting the old order, but guess what? Florida, 7 years out of 8, created more jobs than any state. 4.4% growth in people's income, and the government grew at half that rate. They called me Vito Corleone. 2,500 separate line items in the budget, and I was an equal opportunity vetoer. If you were influential or a Republican, you got vetoed just like everybody else. It's not about the personalities on the stage. It's about service. It's about principle. And the concept of pushing power back to people is definitely what we need to do in this country. We're on the verge of the greatest time to be alive. But we have to fix how we tax, how we regulate. We should embrace the energy revolution for us to be energy secure. In fact, we should use our energy just as a tool for foreign policy. I mean, we're living in a world of Alice in Wonderland logic if you think about it. This president has allowed the mullahs to begin exporting oil, but he prohibits the United States from exporting oil. This is all backwards. America at its best, where you push power back and you allow in a dynamic response to the great challenges, will create enormous prosperity. But we have to fix these things and shift power back to the states. As a governor, I can tell you that every governor, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, believes, and I think correctly so, that they can run the transportation programs, the education programs, the social service programs, all better than the federal government. So why don't we push all of this back to the states where it was founded, respect the 10th Amendment, and allow for more innovation to take place so that we can rise up again. Respect people being empowered to make choices more than any other place is education. The federal government has no role in the creation of standards, content, or curriculum, but if I'm elected president, I promise you I will be a partner for dramatic reform. If a state wants to create a statewide voucher program, the federal government ought to release the money to empower that governor and those education system to be able to enhance it with federal money. I'll never forget the joy in my heart of seeing thousands and thousands of kids who got a chance to go to a private school that otherwise they wouldn't. A kid like Denisha Merriweather, who I met last year, who's now a 25-year-old woman. She grew up on the other side of the tracks in Jacksonville, Florida. I hate that term, other side of the tracks. We should obliterate that from the language of this great country. It shouldn't matter where you start in life. It's how you try to achieve and pursue your dreams that matters. There is no other side of the tracks when you value life, when you believe that people are assets. That means you have to empower them to give them the same opportunities that people on the other side of the tracks are. And in Florida, Denisha was held back twice in third grade. A dysfunctional family. I'm sure they loved Denisha, but they never told her that. She got to go because of her godmother to a Christian school because of the corporate tax scholarship voucher program, the largest in the country now, 80,000 kids going to private schools. She went to a Christian school, and guess what? I can only imagine it, but a teacher put her arm around that child and said, "I love you. You're special. You're capable of learning." Imagine a country where it happens all the time, where we actually have children that can rise up because they're told they're unique and special as they are. Well, in Denisha's case, she overcame those 2 years. And she was the first in her family to graduate from college. And now she's getting a master's. You know what? In Florida, 250,000 kids are grade level readers because I took on the entrenched interest. I fought for the Denishas. It didn't matter whether Denisha or her family was going to vote for me. That's totally irrelevant. We need to be on the side of people that just want a chance to be able to live their lives of purpose and meaning. Our country is too great to hold people back. So pushing power back is what we desperately need to do. And if I'm elected president, each and every day I will find ways to do that because I know America's brightest days are ahead of us. Finally, religious freedom is being attacked by all sorts of places. And we'll have a conversation with Dr. Robertson, I'm sure, about this because I know it's top of mind, and I have views on this. And I truly believe that in public life, we need to make sure that we protect religious freedom. It is at risk. But the United States needs to play a role around the world as well. My daughter-in-law's parents are Iraqi Christians. She was born in Canada. And she sensitized me to the tragedy that takes place now each and every day in Iraq and in Syria. And I've met people along the journey that are losing their loved ones because of their faith. In fact, Mosul For 1,500 years, I believe, communion had always been given in Mosul. Today it's not. Because of this radical Islamic threat that exists in a caliphate the size of Indiana, now religious people are being persecuted and murdered and beheaded. This is a place where the United States needs to stand tall. But for us, who? Who? Who will stand on behalf of the oppressed, the people of faith, the persecuted? There's a big conversation in my own party right now about this. We have the front-running candidate who says, look, when I'm elected president, the first day, Syrian refugees will be sent back to Syria. Is that the America that embraces the values that have created our greatness? No, it isn't. America at its best defends the persecuted, defends people who are acting on their faith, no matter where they are, both in our country and outside. But for us, who? Who will take care of these people? It's in our security interest to be engaged in Iraq and Syria to create a more peaceful world. It's in our security interest to stop Islamic terrorism and the brutality of the Assad regime that murders 250,000 people without any consequence. This has to stop, and only the United States can lead. It doesn't mean we have to be the world's policeman. It doesn't mean that, but it does require American leadership. The next president should stop talking so much with grandiose language of red lines, that ISIS is the JV team. Stop talking and acting based on American values and American principles. If we do that, we will create a safe and secure world. And if we do that, we can get to the business of creating high sustained economic growth where people will be lifted out of poverty, and the great middle of our country, that defines us as a nation, will have a chance to get a pay raise for the first time in 15 years. That is the mission I'm on. And I promise you this, as a candidate, I'm not going to appeal to your anger. It's easy to do. People are legitimately angry, aren't they? There's a lot of things going wrong. We're never going to solve problems in this country by appealing to people's guts, their angst, the anxiety that exists. We need to lift people up and give them a sense that we'll fix these things. And when we do, this will be the most extraordinary time to be alive. If you share that view, which Americans historically have always believed, it is what defines us as a nation, that we've always felt our children and grandchildren would have more opportunities than what we have. If you believe that in your heart, I hope you'll watch the campaign unfold. I hope you'll pray for me and my family. And ultimately, I hope you vote for me. Thank you all very much. Thanks. Thank you.
The source of optimism I have is because I know the American people and its ability to innovate, to create, to disrupt, its belief in the future. There's no way that Barack Obama or the progressive liberals in Washington can just take away the bigness of this place. I think the progressive liberal agenda, they tried it. It failed. It doesn't work. The barriers right now on people rising up is the great challenge of our time.
Look at the state of affairs in Washington, D.C. now. Think of how incompetent, and in some cases I would say corrupt, Washington, D.C. is, where the president is never held to account, never accepts responsibility, always blames somebody else. And the net result is people do not believe their government works for them, but that doesn't mean it can't be the way it should be. I know how to do this because during the time that I was governor, we turned the systems upside down that weren't working. 1.3 million new jobs were created. We cut taxes every year. We reduced the state government workforce by 13,000. Income rose in people's pockets. People were lifted out of poverty. Children started to learn. Our child welfare system got a lot better. What we have to do is stop saying how angry we are about it and win the election so we can fix it. The point is that leadership means you got to be all in. It's not about yapping. It's not about talking. It's about doing. It's about creating strategies. It's about rolling your sleeves up and working with people to improve the chance for people to rise up.
Please welcome once again Governor Jeb Bush and the founder, chancellor, and CEO of Regent University, Dr. M.G. Pat Robertson.
By the way, that was a magnificent speech. Don't you think you ought to give him a hand? I really, fantastic. Thank you. Jeb, I'm supposed to ask you some questions. I want to start out. You're elected president. We're going to assume that for now, okay? You don't mind that?
Okay, we'll skip over all the easy part.
Yeah, all right. This will be you've just sworn the oath of office. You've got that little office off in the Capitol, and you're sitting down. What are the few, let's say the number one issue you'd take? If you could, with a stroke of the pen, do something, what would you do?
Well, I think in the first week you need to use the power, the executive authority you have, because working with Congress is going to take a little bit of time to kind of reestablish the dysfunctional relationship there needs to be fixed. It's going to take making sure that people, don't assume you have bad motives. Unfortunately, we're in an environment where the way you win is push people down and make yourself look better. When we were growing up, you were spanked when you did that as a kid, right? I mean, now it's kind of blood sport, and so reestablishing that relationship with Congress is important. But I'd say using the executive authority to undo the unconstitutional things that this president has done would be one of the things, and there's a lot of places where that would happen. And then secondly, just look at the world, Dr. Robertson. It's just that we've seen an unraveling of the order of the world, because as we pull back, no one has filled the void other than Islamic terrorism and nation states like Iran, which we've enabled by our agreement, and Russia and China. And so I think we have to reestablish America's leadership in the world, and there's some things that I think would send a clear signal about that. And if I had to pick the one place to start, it would be Israel. It would be making sure that the world knows there is no gap between the United States and Israel again.
Okay. Back 2 or 3 years, if you had to do it, what would you do and have done in Syria?
I would have done what the president said he was going to do and then lost his will, which was to support the Syrian Free Army and to engage the world to do the same. By saying we were going to do it and then not doing it, and then worse yet, adding to that by saying there was a red line that was never to be crossed, and then it was crossed, and then calling ISIS the JV team and not doing anything about it, we've created chaos. And so had we done what we should have done 4 years ago, there would be a vibrant alternative to both of these forces of evil. And it's still there to be done. It's just going to require a long-term commitment. There are the remnants of the Syrian Free Army, and the United States needs to engage with the Arab world to say, this is our team. Turkey and the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris, they can't pick and choose. There should be one team. There should be a safe zone for them. There should be a safe zone for the refugees so they don't imperil their lives crossing into Europe. We should provide security with air power, and coordinating this effort, I think, would be the way to do it. And we should have a no-fly zone. The argument against it now, because we've allowed the Russians to come, is, we don't want to create a conflict with Russia. Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting being a warmonger here, but shouldn't they be more concerned about us than us being concerned about them? I mean, am I missing something? So, listen to the commanders, create a strategy, act on that strategy, and be in it with a clear, consistent message that we're in it for the long haul. That's how you change events, and ultimately the pressure will mount, and Assad will leave, and I think we can be very successful in Iraq and Syria to take out ISIS as well. But right now, it's all just kind of running out the clock. I think we're waiting for January of 2017 and saying adios, And
what would you do with ISIS? I mean, they talk about boots on the ground. Would it take a force of American troops to get the job done?
Well, we have 3,500 troops in Iraq right now, but they're pulled back. They're not embedded with the Iraqi military. The Canadians are embedded with the Iraqi military. Maybe after this last election they may stop, but they're embedded, but we're not. And we need to be embedded with their military. We need to have forward controllers to know where our sorties go, that they're going to the proper place. We need much better diplomatic activity. We're allowing Russia and Iran to have more influence in Iraq than we do. I mean, this is not the right way for American leadership. So I think you need to have a strategy that arms the Kurds, that re-engages with the Sunni tribal forces, that is engaged with the military, and where there's a clear objective of pushing ISIS out of Iraq, then the hard work begins as it relates to Syria.
You're talking about the Kurds. The Peshmerga have shown a will to fight and ability to fight.
Absolutely.
And yet they're begging for arms, and we are sending arms to the corrupt government in Baghdad. What would you do about that?
I think we should directly arm the Kurds. And their sensitivity of the federal government, and you don't want to create massive dysfunction at the federal level, but there are war fighters, and they have an interest in doing this. And we saw, for example, this week that special forces heroically liberated people that were on the verge of execution in concert with the Peshmerga forces. And so these guys know how to fight, and I think we should provide direct support for them.
Speaking of Putin, he looks at the greater Russian. He wants to get back to what the old Soviet Union had, but he went into the Ukraine and just took over the Crimea, and we didn't do anything. And have we actually armed the Ukrainian forces in any measure?
No, we haven't, and they've been requesting defensive weapons, and I don't believe we've given it to them. I might be wrong about that. It might be covert, but I haven't filled out a security clearance form, so the Chinese don't have all my information.
All right.
But I'm assuming that we haven't fulfilled what was a commitment that hasn't been fulfilled. And it's wrong. I mean, this is the problem. I'm a student of history just as you are, and I think real leadership is not about talking. It's not about grandiose language or trash talking. I mean, this president called Russia a regional power. Now, you're Vladimir Putin, and you see the vacillation of our leadership and negotiating with enemies, unilaterally conceding things and not acting on the talk that you give. And you say, this is prey for me. I'm all in. And he is a bully, and what he sees, he calculates the risk. If the risk is small and the possibility of achieving the objective, which I believe, I think you're correct, that this is an objective to reestablish their leadership and presence in the world, he will act. If he believes that the consequences of action will have a downside far worse for him than the possible upside, he won't act. I mean, that's what we need to restore. It's peace through strength, where it's not our words that matter, it's our actions that matter. And the sanctions that the Europeans particularly have on Russia, I think the objective in Syria, part of it is to try to establish be a player in the Syrian episode to prop up Assad and deal perhaps in some way, I don't see how you could do it, on the refugee problem and tell the Europeans, lighten up on my sanctions and I'll help you. And that would be devastating because those sanctions have actually worked.
We've been watching the last day or so the hearings about Benghazi, and it looks like there was a narrative that took place, and the committee has now found emails from Hillary Clinton sent shortly after the incident that says it is clear that this is a branch of Al-Qaeda. But within a day or two after that, the party line came out and said, no, it was a video that insulted, and this was a sort of a spontaneous demonstration, and that went out to all of the networks when the National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, went out with that lie. What do you think about that? What should be done to Hillary?
Well, the fog of war, this was clearly a fog of war deal. This was in the midst, 30 days, wasn't it, or something like that, 45 days in the midst of a hard-fought campaign. And they wanted to, look at the shiny object, don't focus on this, because it would have shown a weakness. And now we know that, an extraordinary number of emails were sent saying we need security. 600, is that what the number was? And there was no support, and tragically 4 people lost their lives. And the day after that, as you said, the email went out from Secretary Clinton to Chelsea and to the Prime Minister of Egypt, saying that it's clear that this was a terrorist attack. It's always this, isn't it, with the Clintons? It's just the trustworthiness, just being honest and say, hey, these things happen. We're living in a dangerous world. maybe the case could have been made that they thought they had enough security. Maybe. But there should be some accountability to the 4 families that lost patriots. And to spend this much time to get to that basic truth that in fact it was not secure and in fact it was a terrorist attack, I think is unconscionable, to be honest with you.
A highly decorated general and former head of the CIA was actually indicted and found guilty of at least misdemeanors because he gave a few documents to his mistress who was writing a biography. Hillary Clinton has given a whole lot more than that around, and who knows how many thousands of pages of confidential information have been leaked. Do you think she might get indicted, or is that too much to contemplate? You can't speculate.
I may take a pass on that one. But I would say this, to slough off this as it happened in the debate in Las Vegas, to say, well, no big deal. No big deal. The FBI is investigating it. The State Department's going to go through another 6 months of review of all this. They've had to hire people. This is the Clinton view of economic development, hiring 10 more people in the State Department to go through emails. That's what they consider, economic growth. I think we ought to shrink government and create economic growth inside the private sector. So this is not finished yet. And look, in a world where people don't believe what politicians say, in a world where government is probably at its lowest respect amongst the people that it's supposed to serve, these things make it worse. And we need to restore some level of integrity in government. The government shouldn't be our master, it's our servant.
Yeah,
and right now, it doesn't feel that way, does it? And so, a little bit of transparency, a little bit of humility, a little bit of recognizing that these ideas, the top-down driven approach to things are going to solve our problems, and just recognize maybe there's a better way is, I think, appropriate right now, because we've lost our way in Washington.
You've brought out a new tax plan. It's a very thorough tax plan. It may be the best out there. What is your concept of reforming the tax code?
It's to eliminate as many of the carve-outs, the credits, the deductions that pick winners and losers. Again, who cares what the intentions are? Yeah. I mean, I assume everybody's got good intentions when they come up with these ideas. It doesn't matter. In a free society, shifting power back to people means you don't pick winners and losers through the tax code or through the regulatory system. You create a free system where people can earn success, and the objective is to build capacity so they can do it. So a tax code that's simple shifts power away from Washington and creates, I think, an explosion of investment in our country. One of the things, Dr. Robertson, that I think is important is to recognize that we're one of 2 countries, I think, that have a worldwide taxation system. If we went to the territorial tax system and we have $2 trillion of cash, mostly profits overseas, and if we tax that at a lower rate and allow that money to come back, you would see investment in this country that would create economic activity that would allow for wages to grow. And if you lowered the corporate tax rate to 5 points below China, which is what I proposed, we have the highest tax rate in the industrialized world. If you lower the rates and eliminate the tax deductions, go to 20%, and then you have full expensing of capital investing, you're rebalancing the tilt towards Wall Street to Main Street, which is where the jobs need to be created. And I think that is a far better approach, and lowering rates for individuals so that people making $40,000 or less in a family of 4 wouldn't pay federal income tax. They'll still pay payroll tax and all the other taxes they have to pay, but having the middle class have $2,000 in their pockets will create a lot more economic activity, and more importantly, it'll give them the freedom to make decisions themselves. They're not trapped in their lack of opportunity.
Would you take away the mortgage deduction, or would you take away the charitable deduction, or what?
Our proposal was to keep the charitable deduction.
Yeah.
Although I actually think if we could, I would consider eliminating that as well. That might not be great for the university, so we're going to give you a break.
I will not applaud on that one. Go ahead.
But we're lowering rates and putting a cap on deductions.
Yeah.
So the wealthy use the deductions more than working people. That's a simple fact. And so by putting a cap on it, you'd still have the mortgage deduction, but you'd have a cap of a percentage of the value of the deduction. And all of the other deductions would fit into that, including state and local tax deductions. So I've always found, and I don't know, Virginia's kind of a middle of the road tax state, but I'm from a low tax state. And I always found it a little offensive, because we didn't have an income tax, that states with big income taxes got deductibility off their federal taxes, state and local, like California and New York. Basically, Florida and Texas subsidize California and New York. Mark me down as thinking that's not a great idea. And so we eliminate that tax and then put a cap on the rest. Can I make another point?
Yeah,
just because
go ahead.
Back to empowering, getting away from government, empowering communities and families. Family life in this country has been torn asunder. You've been talking about this for a long while. And our tax code actually, and our transfer payments, the welfare system in our country actually hurts family life as well. So one of the proposals I have is to eliminate the marriage penalty. It makes no sense for a spouse to be out of the workforce and wanting to start to work, and the first dollar they earn, the tax rate is on top of the income that their spouse earns. To allow them to file individually would create a big incentive for people to work if they wanted to, and for people to have more money in their pockets. Here's another idea that Marty Feldstein told me about, a Harvard economist, and that is, for people that are 67 years old, retired, people that are still very active, you pay, exactly. There are a lot of people that are still making huge differences in our society that are working because they want to. And a lot of people have to. And if you're at retirement age and you work, you still have to pay into Social Security. My belief is that once you reach 67 or 66 now, but ultimately 67, you should your payroll tax as an employee, you should keep it. Because that's the way you're going to save money more directly and be able to live a life of independence.
Real quick, we do have this problem with entitlements. The Social Security Trust Fund will be bankrupt in a few years, as will the Medicare fund. What are you going to do with entitlements? There's some thought of making the eligibility age considerably older. What are you proposing, or are you?
So I am on Tuesday.
You am? Am I? Can you give us an advance?
Sure, I can. I've talked about the basics of this. When Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan got together and brought their teams together to save Social Security for a generation, they did it in a thoughtful way. In effect, what they did was they raised, for higher income people, they paid a little bit more, and for the retirement age, for every month of raising the retirement age, a year goes by for a month of raising the retirement age. And now, instead of 65, we're at 66 and moving towards 67. And I think we need to continue that, because people do age and still make a contribution. We're living healthier, and our demography kind of demands it. And secondly, I think we need to focus. There are other things that we can do to create solvency for Social Security that would preserve and protect it for people that already have it, and would reform it so it exists for people that don't. Because you're absolutely right. In the next 10 to 15 years, in the different trust funds of Social Security, there's going to be a 25 to 30% reduction in benefits because of its lack of solvency. And on Medicare, a similar kind of approach is necessary, where you're curbing these out-year costs. You're not cutting Medicare, but you're curbing the out-year costs by implementing health savings accounts, by allowing more competition so that seniors have more choices, where there's competition to drive prices down rather than prices up. Only in America, whenever the government's involved, choices mean more costs. The rest of us in the free market actually find that choices actually drives costs down and quality goes up. And so applying those principles to our healthcare system would yield a good result.
That's like the third rail, and politicians don't want to get on it, but you just got on it. All right, that's courage. That's what we want from leadership. I've got one last question. The media is full of it in the last day or two. You've cut about 45% of the spending in your campaign. A number of workers are going on reduced pay. You've let some people go. You've shifted out of Miami, et cetera, et cetera. Does this mean lean and mean for the future, or does this mean you're in trouble?
This means lean and mean, and it means that I have the ability to adapt.
Okay.
And the circumstances when we started the election were different. I have not met a person that thought Donald Trump would be the front-running candidate at this point. God bless him for his success in that regard. We'll see how long that lasts, but you have to adapt. And my adapting means I'm all in on the early primary states, including Virginia. Every dollar we can save in overhead is a dollar that goes on television, goes on radio, goes on media, goes on voter outreach. And people in our headquarters that do extraordinary work are going to be offered a chance to go to beautiful states like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, and the SEC primary states.
Yeah.
And one ACC primary state, Virginia.
That's good for you. All right. So there's not problem. I understand you had a fundraiser in Detroit a few days ago. Raise $500,000. Yes.
Yeah, I did, and it's hard work. This fundraising stuff's not as easy as people might think it is. I know you guys do great, but
we're unique in that.
Your product's a time-tested product that's been around a long time.
You don't have all the controversy. Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate this chance that we understand some folks in the audience here has been a wonder. By the way, you guys give yourselves a hand. You're a terrific audience. You really have been wonderful. Thank you. And Jay Sekulow has some questions from the audience. Jay.
I do. So, we've got an undergraduate student named Melissa, and she asked this, Governor, what specifically would you do to bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States?
Rather than try to impede it, what we ought to do is to expand it, which means on federal lands and federal waters, we should make it easier for leases so that the government gets more revenue by leasing this and also expands the potential for natural gas. And then defer to the states. If states like Virginia want to expand offshore drilling, which they do almost unanimously, Democrats and Republicans alike, there should be some deference to that. We should allow for the exportation of crude oil, which would allow for more investing in our country. We should be energy secure with North American resources in a relatively short period of time. But all the EPA rules on methane, on the clean power laws that are the first ever use of the EPA Clean Air Act to get outside the fence is devastating to the energy sector. This is the best deal that Americans have gotten in a long while. 40% of all economic activity in the age of Obama comes from the energy sector. And the biggest reduction in cost in family budgets is lower gasoline prices and lower utility prices. So all in on energy, and then fix our regulatory system and our tax code, and we could grow at a far faster rate. Think about Obamacare.
You'd buy Keystone, wouldn't you?
Oh.
That's a
no-brainer. The lowest of the lowest. That fruit is on the floor. I mean, that's the simplest thing to do. Expedite permitting for the infrastructure necessary. All of that is made by Americans. All the pumps and the valves and the pipe and all of that. We dominate this sector. It creates high sustained economic growth and high income. So this is clearly a place where Washington needs to lighten the load and where we create energy security in short order.
They're talking, by the way, about export of hydrocarbons, about oil and gas. There's been a restriction against that over the years for some time. Do you think that's going to get through Congress? You got any?
I think it will, and the president's announced he's going to veto it, so the next president would sign it if I was him.
I got you. All right.
Some of the concern that people have expressed generally, and I know this is something that you dealt with as governor of Florida, and that is regulatory overreach, that we've got a regulatory environment that just makes it difficult to do business. How would you start on that reform?
Well, first of all, let's have a regulatory budget in Washington. Canada and I think Australia have done this, and they actually create an intellectually honest, independent review of what the costs are. And I would propose that we wouldn't add to the cost until we found a way to reduce costs in some other place. That we would have a real focus on shifting power back to the states. Scott Pruitt, who may have been on your show, I don't know, but he's Attorney General from Oklahoma, He's the guy that led the charge on the Obamacare lawsuit. Right. He is a great constitutional attorney general. He's endorsed me, and he is leading the state federal initiative where we're going to lay out a blueprint on how to shift power back to the states. Some of it's by delegated authority, some of it is just by executive order or by law, to allow for Virginia to figure out how they're going to build their roads. And if they don't want mass transit, fine. If they don't want high-speed rail, that's up to the communities to decide this. Again, back to my remarks, every time you can get to the bottom-up approach, you're validating the success of our country. So there is a way to do this, and I know how to do this. This is, I feel the looming presence of my mama behind me when I start getting ready to brag. It makes me feel, I can feel it. But here goes. I've done this. I did this as governor. I challenged the orthodoxy, and the state got better because I did it. And now we've got a lot of people in public life that file an amendment. I filed an amendment to a bill, and they think that's success. Nothing happens. I mean, people literally, Hillary Clinton was a senator for 10 years. You know how many bills has her name on it? 3. Naming a highway for Tim Russert, a great journalist, and renaming a monument, and naming a post office.
That's it.
That's pretty safe.
All right,
but I'm just saying, we got to get to start doing things again, and governors normally know how to do things.
One question about this overreach. They're federal agencies as well as the United States Congress. The number of laws or regulations with criminal sanctions is simply staggering, well over 3,000. We have the largest rate of incarceration of any nation on the face of the globe. We have that 3 strikes and you're out law. We have all these mandatory minimums and so forth. What would you do with that? That's a major problem.
It is, and I'm a signatory on the Right on Crime initiative that was started by a think tank in Texas, and Rick Perry embraced it, and Texas has seen some significant improvement because of the implementation of that. I think we federalized too much criminal law as well. This can be handled much better at the state level, and I think there is. I'm going to express one more time my frustration with Washington. Common theme, unfortunately. The president agrees with conservatives like yourself and the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
But he could not even on things where there's agreement, he would refuse to embrace it.
Well,
and so instead of saying, let's change the law to shift much of our criminal justice system back to the states, allow for states to kind of decide how they want to deal with crime. Let's deal with the fact that nonviolent offenders, there's too many of them in our prisons, it costs too much. He's doing it by executive order. Instead of building consensus and kind of reweaving the system of democracy that we have. I mean, this is just wrong. If we're going to solve problems, we have to find, at least on the places where we agree, let's do it. And then move on to the places where there might be disagreements and try to persuade one another.
That was actually a question that you just answered, which is great, by one of our law students, Daniel. Let me ask you this. We've got a
Daniel,
question.
for the question.
Yeah, good question, Daniel. Treg is watching on the simulcast from Chicago, Illinois right now, and he is also a Regent alum. He asked, what would your plans be to make higher education more affordable? I know that's been a big issue for you, Governor.
So in Florida, the lowest tuition for in-state students is in Florida. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, there's real accountability. And this is something we started, but I give Rick Scott, the governor, and the Board of Governors there lots of credit because they've created a system of accountability. There are objectives that the state, for the money that they put in, they expect. Degree completion being the primary one. We call it a 4-year degree, and yet we measure degree completion in 6 years for full-time equivalent students. So why don't we call it a 6-year degree? Well, because we want the illusion of it happening in 4. The Congress and universities operate, not private universities, public universities, operate under the French work week system.
We've got an office in French. You don't have to get me started.
You get about a 3-day work week. Try to get a class on Fridays. If you want to graduate in 4 years, it's hard. So throughput, if you will. Graduating in 4 years saves a lot of money for families and students that have to borrow money to go to school. Giving students more understanding of what the relevancy of the degrees they're pursuing is part of this. And then using public-private partnerships to lower the costs. And I think universities should have skin in the game. If their students aren't graduating with a 4-year degree in 4 years, why should the students have recourse debt on their backs? Shouldn't there be some portion of that is responsible, the universities are responsible for? The minute you put a little bit of incentive for the universities to get kids with a degree, I think you'll find that they're going to lower costs and make sure that classes are available. And I know this will be a radical idea. I'm sure here at Regent University, professors do actually teach.
They run it through faster than you can imagine. You just have
I think professors should teach a little bit too.
We make sure that. Jay, it looks like our time.
Yeah, let me ask one last quick question from our friend Bishop Harry Jackson.
All right.
And he asked, because there's a lot of concern about what's happening in the inner city right now.
Yeah.
And he asked, what is your urban economic agenda? What would you do to help the inner city?
This is, look, we have 6 million more people in poverty. Our poverty is becoming intergenerational. It's sticky. And the despair that exists is heartbreaking. And any just society needs to be a right-to-rise society. So how would you do it? The 3 things that matter most than anything else are 4. One is security. Communities have to be secure, and law enforcement should not be pulled back. Their job is hard enough as it is, and there should be, build trust again, but there should be security, because that's number 1. Number 2, and more important, is family.
Yes.
A husband and a wife, a man and a woman, loving their children with their heart and soul makes it, and particularly in poverty where the economics, are hard, really hard. It's a struggle for a single mom to bring up a child. It's a heroic effort. And many of the transfer payments only exist when a family is not an intact family. So family matters, and we need to change our policies as it relates to that. And I think dramatically improving the chance of low-income kids to be able to get a quality education, which means private choice, public choice, breaking down the monopoly, making sure teacher effectiveness is as good in the pockets of poverty as it is in the places of affluence. There should be no tolerance for the mediocrity or abject failure that exists in inner city schools. We should all believe that is a huge value for our country.
Dr. Pat Robertson and Governor Jeb Bush for an incredible, great conversation this afternoon at Regent University. Congratulate them. Thank you all very much. Well done. Great job, Pat. I'm going to give you some poll results in a moment. Not those kind.
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
Thank you, Governor. You did great.
Am I looking better?
Dr. Rob, you are. So, poll question number 1. Which political party most accurately represents your values and interests? Number 1 was Republicans with 85%. Libertarian was number 2 with 10%. Democrat number 5. How important is political candidates' religious faith in determining how you will vote? This is interesting. 59% said important. 33% said somewhat important. 8% said not important. On the issues that were most concerned in the upcoming election, the economy and jobs, 26%. Foreign policy, federal deficit, and terrorism each had 12%. Sanctity of life, 10%. Immigration, 8%. But it's interesting, if you look at foreign policy and terrorism, it would have been 24% combined. So that's a pretty interesting result. Which political party do you think can do the best job of handling the issues that is most important to you? You're lad. You think you know the answer. 83% said Republican, 12% said Libertarian, 3% said Democratic. With this question, would you like to attend future presidential candidate forums at Regent University? Everybody said yes, except for 7 people. They didn't say no, they're just not sure. Anyways, it's been a great afternoon. Thank you all for coming again. Let's thank Dr. Robertson and Governor Bush. Good afternoon, everybody.